Amazon just laid off 16,000 employees, including Amazon Web Services employees. What do you do if you find yourself pushed out of your high-tech job? So welcome to Dave is Not AI. I'm Dave, an AI SME and an AI skeptic, looking at AI with a balanced perspective. Let's get started. So Amazon has confirmed plans to lay off 16,000 employees, including AWS employees, following an accidental email leak that occurred. So I don't know if it was accidental on purpose, but evidently an email leak that they're going to lay off a bunch of people. And then, of course, a bunch of people got laid off. So the cuts are part of an ongoing effort to streamline operations, according to Amazon, reduce bureaucracy and focus investments on strategic areas. And most U.S. staff will have 90 days to find new internal roles, or I guess out you go. This follows a previous 14,000 people laid off in October. So about 30,000 total, which is not a small amount of people. And so Amazon is doing what some high-tech businesses are doing. Salesforce did it. I think Microsoft did it. Things like that. They're normalizing their employees. Now, of course, in many cases, Amazon included, they'll go, well, we're going to use some efficiencies around AI to, get rid of many employees. That's typically not what's going on. I'm sure some people were made redundant by, some AI systems, but for the most part, this is dealing with overhiring that they did during the pandemic. And the fact of the matter is, in many cases, the market is weakening and softening for public cloud services with Microsoft and Google and Amazon, that they just thought it was time to normalize their employees and get down to a more efficient state, which is their right. You can lay people off. If you run a business, you can make a decision as to whether or not you want to keep resources around, whether or not you want to keep employees around. And believe me, if there's an opportunity for them to save some money, you're going to be pushed out the door. So this video's kind of focused on what you do. In other words, there's a lot of people out there besides Amazon that are getting, pushed out the door, laid off, made redundant, other reasons that you find yourself, outside of your role, typically not your fault. In other words, just economic circumstances, made it such that they don't want to keep you around anymore. And you have an involuntary exit, out of the company. And you got to figure out what to do if that's the case. And we're going to talk about that here. So keep in mind, for the most part, a layoff is a business event, not a personal verdict. So they're not picking on you particularly. You're going to be part of a larger layoff. That's kind of how they get around, making these decisions. If you're part of a larger layoff, it's not going to be, some sort of a firing action for you. That you just got rid of you because they don't need you anymore. And even though you did an amazing job, and people could be very talented at their job, for whatever reason, you've been pushed outside. Don't take that personally. So companies reset budgets, or reorganize, correct over hiring. That's what Amazon did. And you got caught up in it. It's the way it goes. Some people get caught in it a lot. A lot of people are laid off several times in their career. Some people are not. So don't let the internet convince you that you were replaced by AI. Most of the time, that's not what happened. So that AI excuse is getting a little old. In fact, in many cases, when I see companies do that, use it in 2006, they don't know what they're doing. That's just kind of a key indicator there. They're not necessarily understanding the role of AI and its ability to automate tasks, but not necessarily replace people. But I guess we'll learn as time goes on. Your job is now to stabilize your mindset so you can make good decisions quickly. So not that it's a completely positive event, but look at it as an opportunity to kind of reset your career, reset your personal directions, do something a bit better that's going to make you a bit more happier. So the first thing when people get laid off is they start firing resumes, CVs off everywhere, and filling out a lot of applications, out on LinkedIn and Dice and the job boards and things like that, and kind of a bit of a panic. They reach out to the contacts. I got a lot of emails last week from people who work for AWS who are looking for a job, and they're doing the right thing. They're networking. Make sure if you hear of anything, let me know about it. But don't job hunt. Start value positioning. The market doesn't pay for the keywords, it pays for outcomes. So rewrite your story, your resume, as cost removed, risk reduced, delivery speed improved, reliability increased, that kind of stuff. talk about your successes. Don't just throw keywords out there. In other words, serverless computing and things like that. What did you do with it? What did you improve? How did you improve the business? If your resume says worked on cloud migration, that's weak. If it says migrated X, reduced run costs by Y%, improve recovery time by Z, now you're in the game. That's what people should be doing. The key thing I see when I mentor people, when they're out there looking for a job, they just try to get into the process of it. They just start, throwing out a lot of resumes. They let ChatGPT write them, make it buzzword compliant, all those sorts of things. And they think it's going to get caught by the AI that's typically reviewing your resumes, which is true, and get by to get the interviews. But typically, employers are going to respond to ambitious people that know where their value is and know how to explain how their value is. Your value is not just as a developer, just developing. It's building business solutions that add value to the business, and define how you do that and get excited about it. And the more you sell yourself on your story, the more you'll be able to sell other people on your story. And the big one, choose one lane and go deep. Don't panic, skill spam, start throwing everything out there. One of the things I did when I was in my 20s, because people were paying for developers at the time, is list every language that I knew, even if I used it for one day. So that ultimately doesn't get you the job that you need and get you the job that you want. So random cert collecting is what people do when they're scared. Pick a lane that maps to funded work. Cloud cost optimization, FinOps security, governance, compliance, modernization, platform engineering, data engineering that supports real ops. Not just demos, and then build the proof, a short portfolio, case studies, reference architectures, cost models, migration plans, things like that. I always tell people, keep a portfolio of your work. Whether you do it on LinkedIn, where it's out there for everybody to see, which I think is perfectly fine. You do it on GitHub, whatever, your own personal repository, you write a Substack blog, it doesn't matter. But, what are you proud of? And can you prove the projects and things that you worked on? Now, I know sometimes people are going to tell me, well, that's confidential. Yeah, I get it. But you can still sanitize stuff and put artifacts that are out there that don't violate confidentiality agreements that will still show the value of the work that you're able to do. And you need to get in the habit of doing that, because people, the first thing they're going to ask, can you send me a CV? And send them a CV and send them a cover letter. It's always going to be important with what you're looking for. Again, your goals and objectives. And then send them a link to the portfolio of work that you would like to show them. And it doesn't have to be extensive. It doesn't have to be hundreds of things, but perhaps 6 to a dozen, different projects you worked on, what you did, what you accomplished, what value you had that goes beyond what it says in the resume. Now, chances are they're not going to read that stuff in detail, but just the fact that you have it and you thought through it, that means a lot to an employer. So optimize for the work that survives budget pressures. In tight cycles, companies still fund the stuff that they can't avoid: reliability, security costs, takeout platforms, standardization, modernization, things like that. That reduces, long run costs, and, translate your pitch into an executive language. I help spend less. I help you avoid outages. I help you pass audits. I help you deliver faster product with fewer people. That's how you get hired. Again, getting beyond the buzzwords into the value you're able to bring. And you have to be able to sell it because you're going to sell it because you have that value. So you need to not only ink it, but you need to believe it. In other words, to believe in yourself and kind of write down why I exist and this is what I did. And everybody who's had a career has had moments of their career when they've done an amazing job and delivered value. You've got to be able to take note of that and be able to sell other people on your ability to add value to a business, the reason they should hire you. Not just I can do serverless, I can do, multi-cloud, I can do AI, all those sorts of things are perfectly fine, but those are skills. They're not necessarily value points that you're going to have. So think about that, and I think that's where everybody has a tendency to kind of fall off the radar in terms of looking at the job that they want, versus the job that they're going to get. And there's two different things. Let me tell you, it's really easy, certainly in the tech field, to spin around and go get a job, doing something. But you want the job that you want. You want the job you're going to get up every day and, be pumped to go to. And make sure you don't take the second best job, the third best job. Take the job, find the job that's going to make you happy, even if that takes you longer. It's worth it. Let me tell you, you're going to be able to stay in that role longer. You're going to be happier and healthier. You're going to have better relationships in your life. You're going to have better health. All that kind of stuff is going to be derived from you having work that you enjoy. So finally, in the big one, make a 30, 60, 90-day plan and run it like a production system. So 30 days, stabilize finances, set a routine, rebuild your narrative, reconnect your network. So notice I said 30 days, not 3 days. And so put together a plan, put a couple of hours together every day, get your CV set up, work on your LinkedIn profile, start reconnecting to your network, start building, your sphere of influence, people who follow you, friends, family, past colleagues, all that kind of stuff. And also figure out your finance. If you're not going to get paid for a while, most of the time when you're laid off to a job, they give you severance. It's 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, whatever. But make sure you're paying attention to that you're not going to get yourself into dire straits. And so you're not overspending, and what you need income-wise to get you to the next step. Don't panic. But, that's very important as well. You don't want to find yourself in trouble, running up credit card debt, things like that. People have a tendency to do when they get laid off. So ship 1 to 2 tangible artifacts, portfolios, do targeted outreach, practice interview stories, tied to outcomes. And so start reaching out to your network, start reaching out to potential employers. And you can go to a job board, but read the job descriptions and make sure it's something you want to do. Also, learn how to read between the lines. Many times the job descriptions are written by ChatGPT and it doesn't really tell you what the job's about. So learn how to read between the lines. You can reach out to the hiring manager, and if they're a good company, they're going to have a hiring manager available on the job board that can answer questions about the job, figure out best way to apply for the job, figure out if you're going to be qualified for the job, all that kind of stuff. So this is going to take a lot more time and effort than I think people are normally used to spending. And so you figure it out in days of AI, they're just going to throw AI resumes out there that are created by AI, that's going to be read by AI, and they're going to finally filter you down where you're able to talk to a human and possibly get or not get the job. That's not the way it's done. You need to figure out what you want to do, how you're going to do it, and approach it with a systematic way. Finally, 90 days, narrow targets, negotiate from clarity, and step into roles where you can create measurable impact quickly. Treat this like an operational excellence, cadence, metrics, continuous improvement, all that kind of stuff. Picture the job you want. You got to remember, everybody's now it's work at home stuff, and which is awesome, but there may be some jobs where you're going to have to do some trade-offs. You may have to do more travel than you'd like. You may have to spend more time in the office than you'd like. But if the work is quality work and you're working with great people and they're going to look after you in a growing business that's exciting, let me tell you, it's different than night and day. I've had both kind of jobs in my career where I've had they're going to pay me more as a developer. I'm going to work, in a company with a company I don't want to work for, but they're, paying a good salary, and was absolutely miserable. And then ended up quitting, after a short period of time, and probably lost money when you figured I have to, reset, find another job, and, get going that way, versus finding the job that I loved and finally something you're able to do and something you're able to get excited about. Now, I know people will, become a little bit more romanticized about that. It's work. You're going to have to go to work. You're going to be able doing stuff that you would rather not do sometimes. That's what work's about. Traveling, talking to people, things like that. Doing performance evaluations, doing paperwork, the bureaucratic stuff that comes along with a job. But figure out what that means to you and what kind of trade-offs you're willing to consider. There's always a downside and upside to a job. You're just trying to find more upsides than downsides. And something that is an industry and working with people that you're going to love and you're going to grow. You're going to continuously improve yourself, and also look at your career. Don't just look at the job. In other words, is it going to be a stepping stone to something that you really want to do down the line? For example, I took jobs as CTOs. I was CTO for different, small tech companies because I wanted to be a CEO. And that was a stepping stone to that. So once I was a good CTO, I could step into the role of CEO, and did that a couple of times, and had a great time, and built some companies and built a lot of wealth, and all that kind of cool stuff that comes with being an entrepreneur. But you got to figure out where your head's at, what you're about, what's going to make you happy, and what's going to be the best path for you. And take time to figure that out. Don't rush in anything. I think the big mistake people make when they get laid off, they panic because it was something they didn't plan, suddenly just happened to them, and they rush out into a job, I guess very much like rebound relationships and things like that, and get into a job that they really didn't want. And then they feel stuck in the job because they feel they have to make a living, which is absolutely true. You do have to make a living, but I think this is time you take your time and figure out what you want to do. Figure out what's going to make you happy. So anyway, let me know what you think down in the comments. Whether this is helpful or not, what you do when you've been laid off and look for a job, or what do you recommend to some of the people who are in that situation now? Anyway, don't forget to like and subscribe and check out my other videos on this channel. Also check out my In4World Cloud Computing blog, my 100+ LinkedIn learning courses, and of course, my generative AI architecture course out on Go Cloud Careers. And finally, my latest books, Unlocking the Power of Cloud and An Insider's Guide to Cloud Computing. So until next week, stay very, very safe. The magical YouTube algorithm thinks this is another one of my videos that you should watch next. Take care, guys.